For Grace, love, or worse, marriage, was never an option. Not because she hadn't seen it on TV, or in books with happy endings, but because real life, her life, told a different story. Her childhood home had more shouting than laughter, more slammed doors than hugs, and more tears than kisses. The fights between her parents echoed in her head even now at 31. Her mother's voice trembling, her father's fist pounding the wall. That was what marriage looked like to her, trapped chaos behind a pretty veil. So Grace made a promise to herself before she even hit puberty. No man would ever have the power to break her. She kept that promise. Built her career, saved her money, and when she wanted a child, she chose IVF. No questions, no apologies. She had her daughter, Zara, and they moved to South Korea for a quiet, beautiful life. But then came a sunny afternoon, a wrong delivery, and a smile from a man with eyes too kind for his own good. Grace didn't know it yet, but love had just been delivered to her doorstep. Grace looked at the delivered products, wondering if it was what she actually ordered. She sat on the floor of her small living room, pulling out one strange item after another. A man's cologne. Korean comics. Instant noodles. She frowned. What is all this? She looked again at the label. Her name. Her address. Everything was correct. But the box clearly wasn't hers. She was tired. Her 4-year-old daughter was already tugging at her arm, asking for snacks. Orders for her small online shop still needed packing. And now this. Grace sighed and rubbed her forehead. This was not what she needed today. Just as she reached for her phone to report the issue, the doorbell rang. She dragged herself up and opened the door slowly. A young man stood there. Helmet in one hand, a different box in the other. His black delivery vest hung loosely on his body, and he looked nervous, but polite. Before she could speak, he bowed slightly. "I'm really sorry," he said softly. "That last box was wrong. This is the right one." He lifted the new box carefully, as if it was made of glass, and held it out to her with both hands. Grace didn't say a word. She just looked at him. Then he smiled, small, shy, but honest. And just like that, her anger melted away. She took the box from him. This time, the label matched. The weight felt right too. Still silent, she turned and looked at the box on her table. "That other one's not mine," she said quietly. "I'll take it," he replied. His voice was calm. He stepped inside just far enough to lift the wrong package, then backed away without making a fuss. Grace watched him. He wasn't in a hurry, nor was he trying to impress. But somehow, his calmness made her feel a little lighter. Before leaving, he bowed again. "Have a good day, Mississippi." Grace stood at the door as he walked away. She looked down at the correct box in her hand, then back at the hallway he had disappeared into. She didn't even realize she was smiling. She closed the door. That smile. It was kind of cute. She shook her head quickly. She was a single mom, working hard in a country that didn't feel like home yet. She didn't have time to start thinking about delivery guys. But something about him with the soft voice and quiet smile stayed in her mind. And it would not be the last time he came to her door. The next time Ha-jun delivered something to her doorstep, Grace didn't even hear the doorbell. It was her daughter, Zara, who did. The little girl ran straight to the door, her small feet tapping across the floor. By the time Grace looked up from her packing table, Zara had already opened the door halfway and stood there grinning. "Mommy's things," Zara called out with excitement. Grace's heart jumped. She rushed over and pulled her daughter back gently but firmly. "Zara, how many times have I told you not to open the door by yourself?" She turned to the doorway, ready to apologize and scold. But there he was again. Ha-jun. That same young man in his black vest, holding a small package in both hands. His helmet rested under one arm, and his dark hair looked a little messy from the ride. He didn't seem upset. He just smiled. A soft, quiet smile. The kind that didn't ask for attention. It looked like it had always been there. Like he was born with it. And for some reason, that stirred something deep in Grace's chest. She quickly looked away, her hand still resting on her daughter's shoulder. "Sorry about that," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It's okay," he replied calmly. "She's friendly." His voice was just like the last time, gentle, not loud, not shy. Just easy. Grace didn't answer. She simply took the package and gave a small nod. "Thank you." He bowed slightly and turned to go. And as he walked away, she noticed something she hadn't before, the way he moved like he was used to being unnoticed. Quiet steps. Light footsteps. No rush. When the door closed, Grace stood there for a moment, still holding the small brown box in her hands. That smile. It wouldn't leave her mind. She knew she shouldn't feel anything. She had promised herself long ago that she wouldn't fall in love with any man. She had grown up in a house where love came with shouting, slaps, and silence. Her father had made sure no man would ever feel safe to her again. So she stayed away. Even in Korea, where everything already felt so far from home, she built walls around her heart. Men are scary. Men are selfish. Men are never safe. That's what she always told herself. But that smile, that gentle, unshaken smile kept breaking through the cracks. She shook her head, almost annoyed with herself. "It's just a delivery guy," she muttered. Still, when she went to bed that night, in the silence of her small room, she remembered that quiet voice, that soft gaze, that smile. And for the first time in a long while, her heart wasn't so heavy. Wasn't until a year later that she saw him again. This time, he looked more stunning than she remembered. If he hadn't shown up in a delivery vest, no one would have believed that was his job. Grace had just finished cleaning up after dinner. Zara had fallen asleep on the couch with a storybook half open on her chest. It had been a long day, one of those days where nothing really went wrong, but nothing felt right either. She heard the doorbell. It was just another package, she thought. She opened the door with half her mind still on the dishes in the sink, but then froze. There he was. Ha-Jun. Still in a black delivery vest, but this one looked newer. He stood a little taller now, his face more defined, his eyes steady. His hair was slightly longer, curling just at the ends near his ears. His helmet hung by his side, and the moment she saw him, that smile. That same gentle smile that had once softened her on a hard day. For a moment, Grace didn't say anything. Neither did he. But then, from behind her, a little voice called out sleepily, "Mommy, is it the Smile Man?" Grace turned around, surprised. Zara had peeked from behind the couch, eyes still heavy with sleep, her hair messy from her nap. She was smiling. Ha-Jun gave a soft chuckle. "You remember me?" Zara nodded, walking closer to the door like she had never been warned not to. Grace gently held her back. "I didn't think we'd see you again," Grace said, finally finding her voice. "I got moved to a different district," he said, "but sometimes I still cover this area." Her eyes studied him. Something had changed. Something quieter, calmer, stronger. Without thinking too hard, she opened the door wider. "You want some coffee? You look like you've had a long day." Ha-Jun shook his head, polite as always. "Thank you, but I still have 2 deliveries left." Grace smiled. "Still working late?" He nodded once. "It's a habit." She wanted to say more. Ask how he had been. Why it felt good, too good, to see him again. But instead, she just nodded and accepted the package he handed over. "Good night, Grace," he said softly. Her name in his mouth sounded familiar. "Good night, Ha-Jun." She watched him walk away, and her heart did that thing again. That quiet tug. That flutter. And for the first time in a long time, she stood by the door long after it had closed, holding a box she didn't care about, because her mind wasn't on the delivery. It was on the smile. The one she thought she had forgotten, but hadn't. Grace had reached a point where her online store wasn't enough anymore. The bills were steady, her daughter was growing, and life in Korea wasn't cheap, not for a single mother without family close by. She needed something else. Something physical. Something steady to balance the quiet uncertainty of her small business. So, she began looking. She searched for jobs she could manage between school drop-offs and late-night packaging. Nothing fancy. Just work. Then one morning, she saw it. Packing assistant wanted. No experience needed. The warehouse wasn't far. It looked clean, flexible, and the pay wasn't bad. She applied the same day. A week passed. No call. Then, suddenly, an email. She'd been accepted. No interview. No background check. Just a message saying her schedule would begin on Monday and someone would meet her at the front desk. Grace was surprised. She didn't question it, though. A blessing was a blessing. She arrived that Monday morning in plain jeans and a hoodie, her hair pulled back neatly. The warehouse was big but not too loud. Organized. She liked that. The supervisor who greeted her was kind but seemed slightly distracted. He handed her a badge and told her she was recommended internally. Recommended. Grace blinked. By who? The man just smiled. Somebody who thought you'd be a good fit. She didn't press it. But across the warehouse, in a quiet room above the floor, Hajun watched her from the small CCTV screen beside his desk. The moment he saw the name Grace Johnson Okafor on the applicant list, he had stilled. There weren't many people with that name, not in Korea. It had to be her. He leaned forward slightly, eyes following the way she moved, carefully, neatly, trying not to get in anyone's way. There she was. The woman who once offered him coffee after a long day. The one whose daughter remembered his smile. The one who still lived in his head more than he admitted. He had remembered her name, her face, her voice. Working at the warehouse wasn't bad. Grace woke up every morning by 5 a.m., packed Zara's little bag, and dropped her off at daycare before rushing off to catch the early staff bus. She wore the same beige uniform everyone else did and spent most of her day helping to pack jars of handmade scrubs, bottles of natural oils, and small pouches of herbal tea. The air was always thick with the scents of lemongrass, mint, and cocoa butter. She sealed the jars carefully, pressed on the product labels, and arranged them neatly into brown boxes marked for shipment. It was simple work. Not easy, but not terrible either. And it paid just enough to help her breathe. One quiet afternoon, just as she was placing a tray of newly labeled coconut oil bottles onto the sorting shelf, her name echoed through the intercom. Grace Johnson, please come to the upper office. She paused. Her fingers froze around the last bottle. No one liked being called upstairs. It was either a warning or a change. And she wasn't sure which one she deserved. After wiping her hands on her apron, she made her way up the narrow staircase that led to the office above. The upper floor was different. Silent. Full. Clean. The buzz of machines and voices downstairs faded behind her. She stepped into the glass-walled office and stopped. Hajun was there. No delivery vest. No helmet. No scooter keys in hand. Just a navy blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a sleek watch on his wrist. He looked like he belonged there. Like the chair, the desk, the quiet air all knew him. He looked up from his screen, saw her, and smiled. That same calm, boyish smile. The one that somehow softened everything. Grace, he said, his voice gentle. It's good to see you again. She blinked. You're working here? She asked, stunned. He stood up slowly. Yes. I help manage operations. She took half a step back, confused. But I thought you were with the delivery company. The other one. He nodded once, still calm. My family owns that company too. And delivering goods to customers was something he did for fun. He forgot to add. Just like that. Like it was nothing. Like owning a company was a casual detail. The room felt smaller. Grace stared at him, her mind racing. So many days had passed since she last saw him. She had assumed he was just a kind delivery guy. From a different company. From a different world. She had no idea he was part of this one. You hired me? She asked quietly. He nodded again. I saw your name on the application. There aren't many Grace Johnson Okafors. I remembered right away. She didn't know what to say. He didn't look smug. He didn't even seem proud. Just sincere. Like this was normal. She stood there, heart pounding, the scent of essential oils clinging to her apron, wondering what exactly had just changed. The shock that the delivery guy was now her boss still felt like a dream. Even as Grace sat cross-legged on the floor at home with Zara, surrounded by puzzle pieces and plastic toy food, her mind kept drifting back to that glass office. That navy blue shirt. That calm smile. Zara was giggling beside her, pushing a toy spoon toward a doll's mouth. Eat, baby. Eat. Grace forced a smile and tapped her nose. You're spoiling that baby more than I spoil you. But her thoughts were far away. She still couldn't wrap her head around it. Hajun, the polite boy with the soft smile and scooter helmet, was the man sitting behind the desk upstairs. The one who hired her. The one who said, so casually, my family owns that company too. Who? How many companies did they own? Who was he really? She had worked beside men all day, taken instructions from supervisors, swept floors, packed boxes. And he had walked past them like he was just another staff member. Like he didn't belong at the top of the staircase. But now she knew better. It made her chest feel strange, tight in some places, soft in others. Something inside her was restless. Was he watching her? Did he hire her just to be kind or because he is generally kind? She didn't know. All she knew was that his face wouldn't leave her mind. And it wasn't just because he was handsome. Zara tugged her sleeve. Mommy, why are you not playing? Grace blinked and looked down at her daughter's big brown eyes. I am, she said softly, reaching for another toy. I'm just thinking about the man who used to bring her orders, and now quietly held the keys to something much bigger. She never saw him again for quite a long time. After that surprising day in the office, Grace returned to her usual routine like nothing had happened. But something had. Something quiet and lingering. Every morning, she dropped Zara off at daycare before heading to work, and each time she entered the warehouse, she felt a small, silent hope rise in her chest. Maybe she'd see him again. Maybe he'd pass by. Maybe he'd say something. But he didn't. Days went by. Then weeks. No sign of him. He had called her up once, revealed who he really was, and disappeared just like that. Her co-workers mentioned him often. Mr. Hajun is really kind. He actually listens when people talk. He even helped carry boxes once when the system went down. Grace said nothing. She just listened, biting her tongue. The more she heard about him, the more a strange feeling grew inside her, something like disappointment. She didn't know why. Maybe because she had thought she was special. That he'd smiled at her for a reason. That he'd remembered her because it meant something. But it turned out, he was just nice to everyone. And somehow, that stung more than it should have. Then, one quiet afternoon, while she was carefully rearranging mislabeled skincare jars on the shelf, she heard footsteps and quiet talking. She looked up and froze. There he was. Hajun. Clipboard in hand. Shirt neat, sleeves rolled. No delivery vest. No helmet. Just him. He walked beside the floor supervisor, nodding, listening, glancing around like he was checking things quietly. His face calm. Focused. But familiar. Then, without warning, his eyes landed on hers. And he smiled. That same soft smile. The one she hadn't seen in weeks. The one she hadn't been able to forget. Grace looked away quickly, pretending to stay busy with the jars. But her hands were suddenly clumsy. And her heart, annoyingly, had picked up speed. He was here. But now everything felt different. He nodded at her as he passed. And kept walking. Grace stood there for a second too long, still holding the same jar, as if it had suddenly become interesting. Her ears were warm. Her chest too aware of itself. She forced her eyes back to the shelf, pretending nothing had happened. It was embarrassing. Not the nod. not him. Her reaction. She scoffed under her breath, more at herself than anything else. How could a small gesture from him make her heart flutter? She knew his age. She'd checked. Searched his name online one quiet night when Zara had fallen asleep early. 27. 5 years younger. And she, Grace Johnson Okafor, was a 32-years-old grown woman with a child. A warehouse worker who spent most of her days elbow-deep in bubble wrap and toner bottles. She had no business feeling this way. None. She hated it. And still, she didn't want it to stop.